I feel like every generation needs new music to help do this impossible lift, which is elevating us all into the heavens where we lose all of our, earthliness. And music has this way of making us all feel like our loyalties are to each other. Music is like a real love song, it's just like primal. Music just sort of brings us all to the same playing field, erases our differences. And I think that in the times we're living in right now, it's so important that we meet one another and that we look each other heart to heart and not examine or measure what are your loyalties and what are mine.
Welcome to Curious Goldfish, a podcast community where music and curiosity come together through interesting conversations with the music makers of our world. I'm your host, Jason English. You can find Curious Goldfish on all the major podcast and social media platforms. And of course, we have all of our content on our website, curiousgoldfish.com. Hey there, welcome back to Curious Goldfish. If this is your first time here, I'm really glad you're joining us. Today's conversation is one that stuck with me in a big way, not just because of who it's with, but because of what we talked about. I sat down with Ketch Secor, the voice and fiddle behind Old Crow Medicine Show. And look, it's easy to think of Ketch as just a band leader or a songwriter, but the truth is he's something more than that now. He's become a steward of country music's past, a resident historian of sorts, and he's carried that responsibility with a deep sense of purpose. In many ways, he was handed that baton by Marty Stuart, one of the great preservers of American music. And Ketch hasn't just held on to it, he's running with it. We talk about what that means, not in some grand abstract way, but in the little choices, what songs to cover, which stories to tell on stage, how to honor the roots without getting stuck in them. Ketch understands that if we lose sight of where this music came from, its triumphs and its messiness, we risk losing the soul of it altogether. And what I love about this conversation is it's more than just a history lesson. It's a reminder that music has always been a bridge between generations. Ketch talks about his solo album, Story the Crow Told Me, and we dig into his creative process and why these threads, these songs, and these stories still matter so much. So whether you followed his career for years or you're just getting to know him, I think you'll find something here that makes you think and maybe feel something a little bit more real. So from Nashville, Tennessee, and about 37 train stations across this country, here's Ketch Secor. Let's dive in. Hey, Ketch, happy Monday, man. I really appreciate your time. So nice to meet you.
Thanks. It's nice to meet you too. Appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, man. I've admired you for so long, and I saw you have a new solo album, and I said, you know what? I would love to talk to him about it. And so I appreciate you coordinating this and setting up time. You're probably one of the busier men in Nashville. So thank you for that. So I want to get to the new album. I want to get to the new album, Story the Crow Told Me. I just have a couple other kind of topics I want to hit with you real quick. So first off, Railroad Revival. You're on the heels of that this summer for a few shows. I happened to catch the one in Simpsonville, South Carolina.
Oh, did you? Wasn't that?
It was a little wet. It was a little rainy, but it was well worth it. And yeah, what a great time to not only be a fan, but I can imagine that the time on stage with all those incredible artists. I guess looking back on that experience, one, I think I know the answer to this question. Would you ever do it again? And two, are there moments and memories behind the stage on the train that you'll always remember?
Well, I would like to be on it right now, and I'd like that ride to go on endlessly. There's something about traveling by train that always makes me feel a little bit more alive and a little bit more connected with great spirit. I've been riding the rails since I was infant, I've ridden most Amtrak lines in the United States. And so and that was a real deliberate choice that my mom and dad made when I was a kid, to be like, okay, well, we're not flying or we're not driving. We're going to drive to an Amtrak station, maybe 3 hours from here, so that we can go be on the train for 2 days, so that we can then go drive to where we're actually going, because it's not connected by a rail. Anyhow, when you love railroads, you make an effort for it. It's sort of like traditional music. Like if anybody had their druthers, we just all listen to the radio and mimic that. So having the palate to be this choosy, you might take trains, you might learn to play old time banjo and, listen to Brother Harmony acts from the 20s like I did. That doesn't make it right for everybody. But I can tell you with certainty that I feel really at home when I'm riding on the rails. Now, add the other thing I feel most at home at doing, the gregarious nature of making music with people. Now that's somewhere where I feel right in lockstep with I'm floating down the river of life when I'm making music with people. I don't have to be friends because music will make us friends. So friends, music, and trains, good God, sign me up.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. So it reminded me of, did you ever see that documentary called Festival Express about the
Sure.
Grateful Dead?
I did.
Yeah, I think it came out, I don't know, 20 years ago, but that looked like a heck of a time with Janis Joplin and the band. So I can only imagine it was probably a miniature version of that in the Southeast. But yeah, I can only imagine the memories that you all made. Did you guys play a lot of music on the train going from city to city?
Yeah, we sure did. We got on in New Orleans and we got off at the front door of Provence, Quebec. So we really did the whole eastern section of North America from the Mississippi all the way to the Great Lakes. I'm including Lake Champlain as a Great Lake. Recent legislation up in the State House in Vermont has suggested that we might make it a Great Lake. That legislation was turned down, but the fight continues.
That's an important one. It's important.
Another fight that this reminds me of is the fight to include Alabama as part of the Appalachian Trail. I really love this intersection of place and geography and regionalism and culture. I just love the travel piece of making music for a living. I didn't sign up because I thought I was ever going to be a virtuoso musician or the world's best songwriter, or, that I was going to be half the entertainer that Houdini or Charlie Chaplin were, or Bob Dylan, or Neil Young, or, Ralph Stanley. I just wanted to go somewhere and keep on going there. So I really have a traveler's soul, and music was a good ticket.
So at the show, I remember Marcus Mumford, when he introduced you, he dubbed you as the conductor of the Railroad Revival. I guess, did you see yourself as the unofficial MC and unofficial conductor and leader?
I think that Ben Lovett reached out to me a couple hours into our rehearsal and said, "Hey, how about you stand up there and do your street corner act, with your top hat and brogans?" So I said, "Sure, man." I love Ben Lovett and Ted Duane and Marcus Mumford. I just love them so much.
Yeah.
And I'd go anywhere to the ends of the earth, wherever they asked me to go, and run up on the stage and play the fool and play the fiddle. Not necessarily in that order. I'll do it.
No, it's and again, maybe it's been almost 3 years ago. I saw when Marcus came out with his solo album, he did a show. It was just supposed to be Marcus Mumford at the Ryman, and then obviously Mumford and Sons came out and did some songs. But I think you made a cameo along with Brandy Carlisle and Jerry Douglas. So, obviously you guys have this history of showing up with each other and having fun, which is, as a fan, it's great when those surprises happen.
Yeah, those guys are really dear to me. I met them at Bonnaroo in the year 2010 or 9, somewhere around then, right when they were just about to springboard up into the stratosphere. And it was one of a couple of times in my life that I've had this intersection with people that were about to go take the music to new heights. And it's a really special opportunity to be a friend. I just love those boys, and I love where they've taken it to, and the occasions that I get to go up there and reach the stars with them. Those are all really fun. And I also love my regular act,
Yeah.
which is kind of down here among us, uh, entertaining, a couple thousand people, or 800, or 1100 in the towns where I go. I just love to meet the people, whether I'm meeting 30,000 of them on the Jumbotron and I'm trying to meet them with my eyes and my enunciation, or whether I'm like in the line or at the damn Kroger parking lot,
Right.
hello, how was your day? I just feel like somebody that people put the wind in my sails.
Yeah. Well, I think another person that has put wind in your sails is Darius Rucker. And again, another great moment from that night is obviously you guys played Wagon Wheel, a song that you co-wrote with Bob Dylan and that he made into his own a few years ago. It was a great moment. I don't know if that was the first time maybe in South Carolina you guys had played it. I don't know. I may have heard wrong, but
it is the first time we've ever played it in South Carolina, where we both have roots. His a bit deeper than mine.
Yeah, his is a little bit more. But well, what's interesting too is I saw an interview that you and Darius did right on the heels of him covering it, and you even said in the interview, you look like a baby, by the way. I mean, I don't know how old you were, but it was 32, 34 or whatever, and you said, I'm a little bit starstruck right now, the fact that I'm having this conversation and that you're going to sing this song. It was just interesting seeing that after the fact of you being on stage with him. It feels like your relationship has come a long way, since then.
Well, he's certainly taken that song to incredible places, and has been a really big part of that tune and its residual effects, in my life, and in the life of my band, Old Crow Medicine Show. Darius he sold tickets for us. He sold banjos and harmonicas for the purveyors of those instruments. Together, we have brought a tune that is half borrowed and half stolen, and a true American folk song, to the world at a time when folk music is vitally important to our shared, humanity, and to our ability to see through all the hubris and connect with people in a way that music is a premier method.
Well, listen, I'm a 50-something person in Atlanta that has this podcast, so take this for what it's worth. But I mean, I consider Wagon Wheel among sort of the pantheon now of the great songs in not just country music, but in music history. I mean, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, Wildflowers, Wagon Wheel. I mean, there's probably a few more, but I think you wrote that at 17. I'm sure thousands agree that it's one of the great songs. Do you reflect on that ever?
I feel like every generation needs new music to help do this impossible lift, which is elevating us all into the heavens, where we lose all of our, earthliness, and we get what's called raiments, right? The raiments of heaven. Once you get up into the clouds, you're not an American. You're not from Ghana. You're not from Canada or Mexico or Eritrea. You're just a person. And music has this way of making us all feel like our loyalties are to each other. Music is like a real love song, it's just like primal. So some songs that I grew up listening to, I'll hear them again, like I Shall Be Released or Forever Young or Heart of Gold, and other tunes. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, because they don't all have to be like hard hitting or about something. It doesn't all have to be like Times They Are Changing. You can
Right.
get off on a tune and it's also completely subjective to your own experience, So you can think that the greatest song in the world is, Eye of the Tiger, and who am I to say it ain't, just because it ain't for me. Anyway, music just sort of brings us all to the same playing field, erases our differences. And I think that in the times we're living in right now, um, it's so important that we meet one another and that we look each other heart to heart and not examine or measure, what are your loyalties and what are mine. What Just look and just have the sensory understanding of one another. Sometimes music can bring us really close in a way that other mediums can. And so I'm always going to be pushing new music out there, but not every song's going to do that for everybody, like we just said. So maybe Rock Me Mama Like a Wagon Wheel is really special because it can bring people together pretty consistently.
Yeah. Great points. So you talk about looking at each other and not worrying about sort of what you bring to the table. There's also this notion of listening, right? Not just listening to the music, but listening to each other. I think a lot of people just they tune each other out. And again, the spirit of this podcast that I'm doing is all around curiosity. I think curiosity is very underrated and underused in corporate world, in personal relationships, family relationships. And I just don't think we were curious enough about each other and our experiences.
Yeah, well, I never suffered from that phobia.
Right.
I mean, I'm just so fucking curious. It's like it's a wonder I even get any sleep at night, or even. But I'm curious about the dreamscape I'll enter. It's a wonder that I have any ability to have moderation, because I'm curious about all of the food in my refrigerator and all of the food in the grocery store. I'm curious about every book in the library. When am I going to have enough time to satisfy all these curiosities? I'm curious about every mile marker in North America. I mean, from Nunavut on down to the Florida Keys, out west to the desert. Good God, I want to, there was a guy that talked about this, and his name was Henry David Thoreau. And his dream of Wanderlust was to suck the marrow of life. Check it out.
Yeah. I think Robin Williams quoted that in Dead Poets Society. I think that was one of the things from the 80s. So my mind's blown right now, Ketch, because I've done about 100 of these now in about a year and a half. And my shtick on this show is to wait till the end and pop the question. So what are you most curious about? You're the first guest that's actually gone there without me asking the question.
Well, we didn't go all the way there. You can still ask. But
well, I want to ask
is everything.
Well, what are you most curious about
Canadian
today?
Arctic.
Like, given everything that you've done and everything that's ahead of you, what's top of mind right now?
I'm curious about the DRC. I'm curious about the Canadian Arctic. I'm curious about the geopolitical situation in equatorial Africa. I'm curious about the Horn. Curious about Saudi Arabia. Generally, my curiosities have to do with culture, politics, and place. Yeah. So I'm really curious about the Canadian Arctic. And I read the Nunatsiaq News, and I love to catch up and find out what's going on in the far north. I think that they love country music up there, and one of these days, I'd like to figure out a kind of Nashville exchange program by which we can go and connect with people in far-flung lands where country music has, some identity. I'm always hearing country music in Kenya,
Hmm.
and they love country music in West Africa too. So if I could figure out so I'm curious about ways in which Nashville could better reach. The tendency here in Nashville is to think of itself as a hub, and the problem with with self identity as a hub is that you don't realize that there's an ebb and flow, there's a give and take, and Nashville's only been a hub since it decided with self importance that it was going to call itself the capital of a genre.
Right.
And now multiple genres find themselves here. But those genres largely aren't from here. Like if you listen to the country music that was made here at the advent of recording technology, right? So let's say that's 1919 to 1928, right? Let's call that the advent. The music that was made in Nashville, Tennessee, it's okay. It's not that great. The music made in New Orleans, whoa. The music made in Southwest Virginia, earth-shattering. Memphis, fucking incredible. Nashville, Cincinnati was good too. Cincinnati was likely better poised to be the capital of country music than Nashville, Tennessee. Also, Chicago was hands down the biggest place for country music before 1930 because of the radio. But WSM really changed all that, and then the hub effect starts. So they all start coming to Nashville, Tennessee, and that never stops. But that's, less than 100 years old. So I think the question Nashville has right now, and I have a song that talks about this on my new album called "What Nashville Was." Check it out.
No,
It's
great.
it's a song that sort of is a question of a line of questioning about a town and what does it owe? What does it got to give back? And what is it if it's constantly in a state of reinvention? Where do you find the connective tissue to what it was?
Well, yes, I have so many questions about that. But while we're on that topic, do you think Nashville is still the playground of dreams?
I think I think for some people it really can be, and I think for the music business, which doesn't actually deal in dreams, but in the commodification of dreams, the music business and whatever it thinks in dream language, whatever that idea of a dream is, which usually got about, the dream life of the music business person versus the dream life of the music maker are often two different things.
Right.
And I think the dreaming of the music business type is really doing well here in Nashville. The music of the music, the dream of the music maker, I think is significantly compromised by Nashville having achieved its zenith for quite a while now. So usually, like, Seattle in the 90s versus Seattle today. Portland in, about 2005 versus Portland today. Towns get to a point and then they go past that point. Austin, like go down on Congress and 6th,
Right.
It's not the same. Try and find like the Armadillo World headquarters, and you might be hard pressed to find where the people who are keeping Austin weird are. Because the rents are, $2,800 a month. Nashville is moving in that direction. So I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to find the genuine article in this town. But the dream will continue forever and ever as long as there's an America full of hopeful, promising young musician types. I just think that dream will move to places that are more affordable, like Memphis or Tulsa or Kansas City. Places that have the right kind of, ingredients, culture, venues, cheap rents, young people, and some connective tissue to the past. So I would definitely bet on Louisville and on St. Louis. Just like in 1926, I would have bet on Cincinnati and not Nashville.
Interesting.
But I would have been wrong.
Yeah. Well, so can we parking lot that and come back? Because I want to go deep on a couple of the songs from Story the Crow Told Me, which is your album. There's a topic I want to ask about that will have some relevance when we dig in, I guess. So I felt like I really knew you, not really through the Wagon Wheel and some of those songs, but I feel like I really got to know you when you were part of the country music documentary with Ken Burns. So I have a couple questions about that, because I've watched that thing probably 9 times from front to back, from episode 1 to episode 8. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about there's a difference between the industry and the music makers. And when you arrived in Nashville in the late 90s, from that point until the documentary was made, I mean, you would think, because you made your first appearance within 5 minutes of the benchmark documentary on country music. And you had only been in Nashville, I don't know, 12 or 13 years, right? So you make your first appearance within 5 minutes. Wagon Wheel, the song that you co-wrote, is literally the opening song of every episode, thanks to the sponsorship of, I think it was Bank of America. They all the different characters play the banjo and pass it to each other playing Wagon Wheel. I'm just fascinated that, again, someone relatively young at the time, not in Nashville 50 years, played such an important role in that documentary, which, again, I think is probably the best thing I've ever seen on TV. I guess looking back, does that experience still sort of shock you that you had the chance to do that? Because didn't you watch, I think I've read somewhere you watched Ken Burns' documentary at Civil War when you were 11, and it completely inspired you to get into history, right?
Yeah, I feel a great debt of gratitude to Ken Burns and Florentine Films and Dayton Duncan and Julie Dumpy and all the people that contributed to country music, this amazing 16-hour film. I also feel a great debt of gratitude to public television for taking the risk and putting together meaningful programming for all Americans, which they have done so consistently now since Lyndon Johnson signed a bill saying that they would be funding from the federal government for something called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Without that, would films like Ken Burns' country music even exist? No way at all.
No way.
And to be the first person to tell you, without PBS, there won't be any Ken Burns films, because Ken Burns films take so many years to make them. And the folks that are selling spots on TV, like, they don't want to take multiple years to make films. They can't. The business isn't constructed that way. So PBS has a unique landing pad for certain types of film and programming that wouldn't be able to be in other spaces. And we see that especially in youth programming and programming for, babies, toddlers, educational programming for kids. Anyway, so I just love public television, and the defunding of public television I find really unnerving and, upsetting. Bums me out big time. Yeah, I think the movie's great, and I am really honored that get to kick it off in the way that I do. It came out in about 2018, and it was, I was getting divorced at the time, and life was in complete upheaval, and I was, bawling my eyes out at every red light. Crossing guards knew I was coming because they could see me, tears streaming down my face, and I was confessing to, checkout ladies at the Kroger and the HG Hills about all the shit I was feeling, and my kids thought I was cracking up. And then simultaneous to this, I was having, I was doing this work through this film that was helping, make a soft landing for me, a crash pad just on the other side of this terrible precipice that I was climbing. And on the other side of it God, everything just fell into place. And, life got good again readily, and consistently.
No, that's
So
great. The documentary is incredible. And I've watched it so many times. You play such an integral part of it. And obviously I had no idea about the timing of what you just described, but not to get into it, but like I was married 25 years, got divorced about 4 years ago, and upped and moved from Colorado to Atlanta to kind of the start of a chapter 2. And when you're in the moment, like I remember driving Kansas, everything I owned was in my SUV, right? And you kind of, you have time to reflect, and you kind of have time to reflect on all the good and all the bad, and sort of say, okay, how did I get here? I grew up in the buckle of the Bible Belt in Missouri. I had a good childhood. I had wonderful kids, all these things. And you just kind of go, okay, how do I feel so shitty right now? And what mess did I make? And we make together to get to this point. But then to your point, I just had the best year of my life when I turned 50. All these great things happen. And I guess you just have to kind of go through that process, right?
Yeah. Or like the guy behind you there over your left shoulder. Sometimes you got to go through the process 3 or 4 times.
Right. Yeah. Redheaded stranger.
Yeah.
Well, no, I appreciate you.
I'm a preacher.
I mean, so I got into that album when I lived in Colorado, because I think the setting is in Denver and everything. I appreciate you sharing that. I guess I just, as a big fan of the documentary, one more question. What was your days like? Was it nonstop from sun up to sundown, filming and doing the interviews, or was it kind of in and out?
My participation in the film comes in a couple ways. What you saw, the interview portion that I'm in, that was about 2-3 hours in a studio in Nashville. And then making the wagon wheel intro, that was about a couple hours, in Florida.
Okay.
At least as far as I was involved with it. And then the really cool thing that I got to do with the film was I got to spend 4 or 5 days in Walpole, New Hampshire, where Ken Burns' studio is, and be with the production team for the screenings and the conversations and the editing and all those things that were really fun to be around. And again, at this time in my life where I just needed something to be different, everything felt like another cage to climb into. But waiting for a car to pick me up at Logan Airport, and being so wondering, like, what is Ken gonna be here? In that way that you get when you're like, a kid, and you're like, I mean, I remember writing letters to Bob Dylan in the 90s when I was a teenager, in the early 90s, especially. I wrote one time that was like, it was the anniversary of his motorcycle accident, and like Bob Dylan's motorcycle accident, which I think was in 1966, I think, maybe 67. So this would have been like the 25th anniversary of that. So what would that have been, like 1990 something?
Yeah.
92 or something?
91, 92, yeah.
It's like, dear Bob, I'm just feeling such gratitude. You didn't die in that motorcycle accident, and yet the things that came out of that accident and your reckoning with your life resulted in some of the best music the world ever heard. Well, not typing it, because of course I was.
Yeah, that's right.
And anyway, sending it off down through the chute at the mail chute, and thinking to myself, I wonder if he writes back. Just like, is Ken Burns going to pick me up at Logan? You get these thoughts and I love the way that our curiosities allow this level playing field, even though, Bob Dylan's probably on like a private jet, and I'm still thinking like, oh, he's probably like down at the mailbox in his bathrobe and slippers reading my letter right now, and right up to his desk to get his stationery out. That curiosity that we have for one another allows us to kind of level the playing field and think, there's that we're all approachable and that life is so rich and mysterious and unpredictable that who knows, we might even just intersect with one another. That happened to me when I was a kid. I was a kid in the 80s, so of course I loved baseball, and I lived in St. Louis, so of course I loved Ozzie Smith. And
Ozzie Smith, let's go.
Biggest thing in the
Let's
world
go.
to me.
Yes.
I was 9 years old, and I thought Ozzie Smith was, up there with Jesus, like
Yes.
right up there, man. Well, I went to a baseball game in Pittsburgh on an Amtrak train with my grandfather. I got there, and well, there was Ozzie Smith. There I was talking with Ozzie Smith. There I was meeting him face to face. You tell a 9-year-old kid he's going to meet Ozzie Smith, and he'll be like, yes, I am. I'm also going to meet Honest Wagner and the Babe.
The Babe. All right. Well, we could go deep on St. Louis Cardinals. I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, and my dad was a professor at the University of Missouri. The
Nice.
only reason he chose Missouri over San Diego State, University of Arizona, Arizona State, because he got his PhD out west, is because he could listen to KMOX in the Cardinal games. That's the only reason. It was the least paying job out of all the offers he got, and that's the only reason I grew up in Columbia. So the Cardinals, it runs deep, and Ozzie Smith was my hero growing up when I played. That's awesome. Jack Buck and Mike Shannon, the whole thing. Well, cool. Well, I don't know. I forgot what I asked to get to that point about Ozzie. That threw me for a loop, but that was good. I guess let's now pivot back to the album, Story the Crow Told Me. How long have you been working on the songs?
Not long at all.
Not
I
long,
wrote them,
yeah.
recorded them sometimes in the same day. I'd write a song and record it, and then we'd be working on, let's add a harmonica part, let's add a mandolin. Because this is an album that's that has a song cycle type of feel that tells a something of a chronology of the development of this band, Old Crow, from the album starts in the late 90s and it ends at around 03, 04, just in terms of like what the story is that the Crow told me. Crow's telling me a tale about a band that comes to Nashville. Well, first they got to get born, which happens in Ithaca, New York, and but before that, something else got to happen. Anyhow, so all that to say, the songs, they took 25 years to figure out. When I went to write them, it happened in a matter of minutes.
So let's go back to what Nashville was, and because you're talking a lot about Dylan. That's why I was going to ask you about this. Did Dylan ever write back?
Bob Dylan did not write back.
Okay, that's fine. You wrote a song with him, so that's probably. But
he might still. I mean,
yeah. All right. So what Nashville was, we alluded to it earlier. So again, I'm going to try to connect a thread here because much of the album is this spoken word style, right? I don't know how many songs, but at least 4 or 5 of them, by my count, have the spoken word on it. What Nashville was to me is spoken word a little bit amplified, and it feels a little bit like kind of a rap, if I could be honest, the first time I heard it. And it reminded me actually of something that you said in the country music documentary that basically said, it's basically country music is the story of whites imitating blacks, imitating whites, imitating blacks. And I was like, man, here's Ketch doing it on this album about a song about Nashville, which we've talked about, where you plug in an ode to Bob Dylan with Girl from the North Country from Nashville Skyline. So I don't know if you've thought about that connection, but it feels like it's a rap song. And I'm like, here he is doing what he said country music was all about.
Yeah, well, it's certainly this is a unique role that music allows us, is to shape shift into voices that are not our own. And here I am singing a duet with Johnny Cash, who's not even on Earth.
Right.
But music allows for this stuff. There's no boundary. Even though the record company might say, well, this is country, and this is hillbilly, this is whatever they are, those bins, they're, their music is a lot more expansive. The spectrum just goes on and on.
Yeah. My favorite on the album is Highland Rim. So I think it's a conversation with you in an area there in Tennessee, kind of a nature preserve and outdoor area around the city. But it's a conversation with you and that nature area, but the nature area is represented by Marty Stuart, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm curious about, back to your podcast here, is about I've moved here from a place with big blue mountains called the Blue Ridge Mountains. I also moved here from a place and on the other side of those mountains and a long, flat, verdant valley called the Shenandoah Valley. On the other side of those mountains were taller, scraggly, gray mountains called the Allegheny Mountains. But then when I moved here to Middle Tennessee, all we got is this like scraggly woods sort of on a upwelling. But then I learned that these mountains at one time had been higher than any of the other mountains where I grew up. They were just so ancient. They had all worn down. And I began to learn about the Highland Rim and the Cumberland Plateau. And I've always been curious about walking in the streams around here, why I would find so many fossils for, ancient aquatic creatures. And of course, that's because of a vast intercontinental sea that went from Columbia, Missouri, all the way up to the Arctic Shield, and way on down past the Gulf of Mexico. So that curiosity has always led me to seek to understand what makes places regionally, differentiate from others, and why one set of hills, why the Ozark are different than the Blue Ridge, even though the cultural, ramifications of the region might be so similar. You got the Scotch Irish on both sides. You got them playing fiddle tunes. The fiddle tunes have the same names. They're in the same tunings. Then they go out to Oregon where the tunes are the same. Well, I just always feel that on the backdrop of that music and the mountains tend to go together. The mountains tend to be places of cultural preservation, and music, which is an art form that's constantly shape shifting, like your last question. Oh, the white kid's rapping now, or Darius Rucker's singing Wagon Wheel now. Everything's swirled up together. Black imitates white, imitates black, imitates white. You can't even tell if Elvis is acting like a white guy acting like a black guy, or a black guy acting like a white guy acting like a black guy. It's like, what? It's all mixed up. This beautiful miscegenation. But, particular landscapes like the alluvial delta, this thing where the music comes from, where rock and roll is born, the Mississippi Delta in Arkansas and in the state of Mississippi and parts of Louisiana. I mean, it's an amazing place. You should check it out. If you're curious about music and the intersection of music and culture and people and place, they ain't nothing better than the alluvial delta. But I'm here to tell you that you can just come to these scraggly hills that they imploded to build super Walmarts. Those places, you're walking in a Walmart parking lot and then you kick up something and it's, a 4, 5, 10 million year old brachiopod. So
I love the song for a few reasons. One of them obviously is the presence of Marty Stuart. Again, back to the country music documentary. Besides you, Marty had a huge role in that documentary. And I kind of was like, okay, this guy's kind of the Forrest Gump of music. He shows up and is part of all these amazing experiences. A lot of the amazing experiences you've had are very similar. When you met, Doc Watson in Boone, and now you're kind of part of all these cool events and activities through the years. So it's really cool to have you and Marty have this, conversation where he's representing this area, and you're asking him for advice, and I was thinking, well, I'm like, well, Marty in his generation obviously was the steward of his generation and the preceding and the ones after, and you've sort of, I think, taken that baton a little bit for your generation. I guess, is there someone that you are either building a relationship with or mentoring that could be, Marty, Stuart, Ketch Secor, and the one that's going to take it even, the next 30 or 40 years?
Yeah, I don't know that I've identified that person, but recently, my friends from Riders in the Sky, Woody Paul, gave me a fiddle that had belonged to Roy Acuff. And so I think the question you're asking me is, who are you going to give the Acuff fiddle to, Ketch? Well, I'm not
Right.
sure, but there's not a doubt in my mind that I'll have to through dozens of people, because the thing about our music is that every new generation spits up onto the surface some group of people who would be the right folk, at the right time, to continue our traditions and to pass the torch to. And you know, but it's funny that it's not always the top grossing artist, and I always feel like a kinship with Marty, that I've been able to find a place sort of my own, that me and Marty, we got a lot in common.
Yeah.
We're also worlds different, but we both learned to walk in the state of Mississippi.
There you go. I mean, so it feels like you've lived everywhere. And I know that the sort of this image of movement is a big theme of the solo album, right? The trains, Ghost Train, Dickerson Road, another location, the time in North Carolina, Nashville, I guess. And you started this conversation talking about trains and transportation. Was that an intentional sort of mindset? I think you mentioned your parents got you on the train pretty young, but as you got older, did you really intentionally say, like, I'm going to live my life and I want to experience all these things in all these places?
Yeah, I think I was pretty intentional about it. Like when I was a kid, I was at my folks' house and I found an old notebook from a math class in about, 11th grade. And in the margins, there's pictures I've drawn of stages. I was particularly interested in a place that I've never been to, called Dawson City, Yukon. I thought, one of these days, Ketch, and this is 30 years ago, one of these days you're going to make it to Dawson City. And I still, that yearning was sown in me real young. They call it a bindle. And, a hobo comes from a hobnobby. It's because you got the hobnail boots. It's just a reference to how your shoes were built. But I always felt like a hobnobby. And, I remember going for Halloween, in St. Louis in about 1984. What are you? Oh, I'm a hobo.
Oh, that's awesome.
I tell you, Marty, a hobo on the railroad tracks when he was a kid. He went back to his mom and said, "Mom, I know what I want to be when I grow up."
That's so cool. All right. Well, so hobos are sort of considered, whatever, misfits, or a character in the margin. So your album is a lot about characters on the fringe, or what society would consider sort of in the mainstream. In terms of the people that you've met along the way, is there a personality, or is there, whether it's a hobo or whoever else, that either you've met and made it a lasting imprint in your mind, or do you still keep in touch with them, through the years?
In making this record, it was really important to reconnect with a whole lot of people that were a part of my story.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to the people I haven't talked to in years.
Oh, good.
I reached out to somebody on Whidbey Island in the state of Washington who had let us sleep on their couch a couple of nights, gave us salmon, and just to say thanks. And I reached out to a whole bunch of people on the backside of Beach Mountain in northwesternmost North Carolina to say, hey, thanks for teaching me this or that. There was a guy who I always called the song Rock Me Mama, Rock Me Mama. I never called it Wagon. It wasn't called that. It was called Rock Me Mama. And then in about 2002, a guy came to a show of ours that I knew real well, a hillbilly guy from way up in, what the hell is the name of that town? In Carter County, Tennessee. And he said, I love that show, boys, and you need to play Wagon Wheel every night. And I thought, well, that sounds like the title of it. So I called him up and I said, hey, thanks, man. So it was really important to reconnect with all of these people. There wasn't ever like kind of one guy that was sort of my, proverbial trickster. Because for me, it wasn't so much about it being a hobo.
Right.
But I'm going to leave you with this because I got to run. It's about finding the trickster. I was always curious about that.
Okay.
I think if your folks are out there listening, look for the trickster. He or she or they operate in the middle, in the margins. They go all the ways. It's a fluidity. It's this world and the next. But go looking for the trickster if you're curious. I bet you'll find the trickster. I'm still searching, but thanks again.
Thanks, Ketch. I really appreciate your time.